All right, hey guys. Sorry for the delay in posting chapter 13. There was some crazy problems with some of the slides and the data, and it was just a big problem that kind of built on itself. So things are definitely a little backed up here. I'm going to talk to Dr. Ham, and I'm going to talk to you guys during office hours about it. You'll still have time to do your activities. I'll still make sure the quizzes go up and that everyone has time to do that. I'll talk about all that. A question I keep getting. So the quizzes are not out of 10 points. They're out of the 2.5 points that you get for attending, that you usually get for a lab day. There's a lot going on in terms of getting the things uploaded properly to D2L and all those other things. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm just going to keep everything in each individual class. It's been tricky, but it'd be too crazy to switch it up now. So I'll keep updating you guys in Teams. So keep checking Teams. I'll tell you when the videos go up, and I will tell you when quizzes go up and content goes up. I'm going to film this video, post it on YouTube, and then immediately get everything uploaded. So let's go ahead and this isn't going to be very long because I do want to make sure that I get this uploaded in time for us to spend a good amount of time going through all the different activities together on Teams. And so I'm going to go ahead and just dive right into this. This is the lecture for the two-way Anova. Okay. So, all right. Let me pull up the slide here. All right, so today in this lecture we're talking about the two-way Anova. Let's just review. This allows researchers to evaluate the mean difference among two or more populations using sampled data. Remember the last video, chapter 12 talks about a one-way Anova where you have one categorical variable, right? So low, medium, high, red, yellow, blue, something of that nature, right? And then one dependent variable like a test score. And you can have between subjects factors, so that's where each group is a different population. So you could have like the example where it's low, moderate, and high motivation. Those are all individual people. Or you could have the same people tested at each level. So if this were a test of driving while under the influence of alcohol, obviously in a controlled situation, you could have someone take a driving test with one drink. You'd have a group of people take driving tests with two drinks. You'd have the same people take the test with 3 drinks and see what happens. So what we're looking at now today is the two-way Anova. So that's where you have more than one grouping variable, right? More than one categorical independent variable. And that's what we call a factorial design. So a two-factor factorial design is where two grouping variables or independent variables change simultaneously within one study. So the Anova evaluates the mean differences attributed to each variable acting independently and the combination of the two variables acting together. So the independent variable is what we call a factor, the variable that designates the groups being compared. And within that, there are levels, right? So a level is the individual condition or values that make up a factor. So for example, how many categories or conditions for each independent variable. So if one grouping variable is, let's say, gender, that would have 2 levels in our analysis, just male and female. It could even be something like, again, motivation from last video had 3 levels: low motivation, medium motivation, high motivation. And with that, you can kind of look at each level, and then the levels intersect, right? So the example here on the screen can be helpful that you're comparing how 3 different treatments for ADHD work for males and for females. So the factors, there's 2, there's the type of treatment and the gender. And each factor has 3, well, the ADHD treatment has 3 levels. And for the purpose of this research, the gender has 2 levels, right? So within that, we have what's called factorial design. So for 2A ANOVA, since we have two independent variables, variable A and variable B, we talk about this as being then a 2x2 ANOVA, right? So if you had one variable or one factor that had two levels and one factor that had two levels, this would be called as you can see here, a 2x2 ANOVA. Notice we say 2x2, not 2 times 2. So each number stands for an independent variable, and the magnitude of each number designates the number of levels within that independent variable. So in the last example, this right here would be a 2x3 factorial ANOVA because you have two levels of this variable and three levels of this variable. So as you can imagine, if both variables had three levels, it would be a 3x3 ANOVA. As you can see, here's just some other examples. You can even have three independent variables. It could be gender, like right or left-handed, and you could do a third variable could be from Wisconsin or out-of-state student, right? So that'd be three different levels. You have a 2x2x2 ANOVA. Again, similarly, you could have if you had three independent variables where variable A has two levels, variable B has three levels, and variable C has two levels, you could have a 2x3x2 factorial design. So this is a question I would have asked you in class. Obviously, we're not in class, so I'll just go ahead and answer it. If you performed a factorial ANOVA for a study with two independent variables, one with two levels and one with four levels, what would your factorial design be? So let's see here. It would be turn over to study two independent variables, one with two levels and one with four levels. It'd be a 2x4 ANOVA. All right, so this is going to look similar to last week. You have this analysis of the total variance in the sample, right? And within that, you have your total variance, and then you have what's accounted for by differences between the two groups, between the three groups, pardon me. And then you have variance that's just within the people themselves. So when you look at factor A and factor B, that's the same as what we looked at last week, where you would have people with low or high motivation. You'd have people with low motivation right here, or high motivation, and this could be boy or girl, right? But then, even within those, you have to get more specific because you're not just looking at these independently, you're looking at them together. So this is where you start to see that there's variance based on specifically which group are you. Are you a female student with low motivation, a female student with high motivation, a male student with high motivation, or a male student with low motivation? So this gets into what we call main effects and interaction effects. So main effect is the overall mean differences between levels of one factor. So in an example where we have males and females and low and high motivation, the main effect is the effect of one IV averaged over the effect of the other. So essentially, this would be if we ignored motivation, what is the effect of being male versus female on test score? Or vice versa, if we ignored gender, what is the effect of having low or high motivation on test score? So that's why it's a main effect, because it's just the main effect of the one factor, regardless of what's going on in the other factor. So the interaction is mean differences that cannot be explained by main effects of two factors, right? So essentially, this is the effect of one factor depends on the levels of a second factor. And we'll see that later in practice, but essentially, this is the idea that, let's say males and females are different, have different test scores for low motivated students, but not for high motivated students. So that interaction is only true for one group. So we're going to do this example from SPSS, where we're asking the question I've kind of been talking about a little bit. Does gender and ACT score, and we're going to split ACT score as a higher score or a lower score, influence college GPA? So let's just talk real quick about the null and alternate hypotheses. Let me see if we have those in here. We do not. So essentially, what you're looking for here is your null hypothesis is that there are no differences between the group means and that they are all the same. Your alternate hypothesis is that the group means are different depending on what category you fall in. So we're going to go ahead and run our 2x2 Anova. So I'm going to go ahead and open the database, which I actually already have open here. And we're going to go ahead and do what it says here on the screen. We're going to do analyze, general linear model, univariate, okay? And I'm going to move GPA to the dependent variables box. And I'm going to move ACT dichotomized and gender to the factors boxes, because those are my two grouping variables, right? Someone can have either a high or low score and be either, again, in only this example, male or female. And then after that, I'll come back to this. We're going to make a plot that'll help us look at it. And that'll help us figure out whether or not we have an interaction. And again, I will be covering this more in depth in the live office hours, but also in the posted video of that for you guys to take a look at and see what's going on. So here we go. All right. So I'm going to go into SPSS. I'm going to go to Analyze. And then I'm going to go to General Linear Model, Univariate. And my dependent variable, as you remember, is this GPA. And then my my factors, which I'll put in this fixed factors box here, are ACT score, but not this one where it's a scale. I want this one where it is a group, right? A two-person group. So we want to make sure we're selecting this two ACT groups variable and then gender. And then I want to make sure that I get to the right information here. So I'm going to go ahead and look at a I'm going to go to the plots, right? Like I was saying, so I'm going to go to plots because it'll make a plot for us. And I want to know on the horizontal axis, I'm going to put ACT, and on separate lines, I want gender. So I want to see what ACT score's effect is for each gender. And that should help me out there. Yeah, make sure you press add, and now it's in there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press continue. And I am going to go ahead and press homogeneity test just to make sure we take a look at Levine's test for homogeneity and variance. And we should be ready to go. So I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to run the analysis. And so as you can see, we've got our numbers here. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the slides. But this is what you're looking for Levine's test, is this first one, based on mean. And right here is this is the meat of what we're looking at, and here's our graph. So again, I'm heading back to the PowerPoint. So here's our analysis, right? So we do not have a significant Levine's test, which again is good. That means we can assume equal variance. And then what I want to look at are three things here. So does GPA differ based on gender? Our significance is above 0.05, so we fail to reject the null. There's no difference based on gender. Does GPA change based on ACT score? And that's, again, ACT score being higher or lower. The answer to that is yes, because we have a significance well below 0.05. We have 0.008. So that means that we reject the null hypothesis. So we now decided that there is a main effect, that for boys and girls, for men and women, higher ACT score and lower ACT score have different average GPAs. The interaction, though, is not significant, so that means we expect this to be the same at both levels. And this is the graph you'll get, and it looks a little weird, but essentially what it is it's showing us the differences for each group. Now, if we were actually to play this out a bit further, you would see that this is still not enough to be significant here. So we see that there is definitely a difference for each group, this being the low ACT and the high ACT. So for both men and women, low ACT group has lower GPA and high ACT group has much higher GPAs. Now, this spread looks kind of weird, and you may think there's an interaction, but there's not quite. The data obviously reflects that it's close to significant, but not quite, and we will talk more about that in the examples. So that's essentially how you run a two-way ANOVA. If you haven't yet, be sure to watch Dr. Ham's video. Here's the information one more time. Be sure to go back to it. I will get all this posted on SPSS, and I'm going to go ahead and just ask you, only have one question for you, And that question is, the question would be about what kind of workout I did this week. And the answer is I jumped rope. I did jumping rope. It was really hard and I didn't really like it. I don't know if I'll do it again, but jump rope is the answer to the one question for this week. So there you go. And I will try to get all that stuff together today. Thanks for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.